War in Afghanistan, 1978–2018, Islamic Republic and NATO. The U.S.-led war in Afghanistan began on October 7, 2001, as Operation Enduring Freedom. It was designed to capture or kill Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda militants, as well as replace the Taliban with a U.S.-friendly government. The Bush Doctrine stated that, as policy, it would not distinguish between al-Qaeda and nations that harbor them. Several Afghan leaders were invited to Germany in December 2001 for the UN-sponsored Bonn Agreement, which was to restore stability and governance in their country. In the first step, the Afghan Transitional Administration was formed and was installed on December 22, 2001. Chaired by Hamid Karzai, it numbered 30 leaders and included a Supreme Court, an interim administration, and a special independent commission. Aloya Jirga, Grand Assembly, was convened in June 2002 by former King Zahir Shah, who returned from exile after 29 years. Hamid Karzai was elected president for the 2 years in the Jirga, in which the Afghan Interim Authority was also replaced with the Transitional Islamic State of Afghanistan, TISA. A constitutional Aloya Jirga was held in December 2003, adopting the new 2004 constitution, with a presidential form of government and a bicameral legislature. Karzai was elected in the 2004 presidential election, followed by winning a second term in the 2009 presidential election. Both the 2005 and the 2010 parliamentary elections were also successful. In the meantime, the reconstruction process of Afghanistan began in 2002. There are more than 14,000 reconstruction projects underway in Afghanistan, such as the Kajaki and the Sulma Dam. Many of these projects are being supervised by the provincial reconstruction teams. The World Bank contribution is the Multilateral Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund, ARTF, which was set up in 2002. It is financed by 24 international donor countries and has spent more than $1.37 billion as of 2007. Approximately $30 billion have been provided by the international community for the reconstruction of Afghanistan, most of it from the United States. In 2002, the world community allocated $4 billion at the Tokyo conference, followed by another $4 billion in 2004. In February 2006, $10.5 billion were committed for Afghanistan at the London conference and $11 billion from the United States in early 2007. Despite these vast investments by the international community, the reconstruction efforts' results have been mixed. Implementation of development projects at the district and sub-district level has been frequently marred by lack of coordination, knowledge of local conditions, and sound planning on the side of international donors, as well as by corruption and inefficiency on the side of Afghan government officials. On the provincial and national level, projects such as the National Solidarity Program, interprovincial road construction, and the U.S.-led revamping of rural health services have met with more success. As NATO prepares to withdraw the majority of remaining ISAF troops by the end of 2014, whether the Afghan government will be able to sustain the developmental gains made over the past 12 years, and to what extent international civilian aid organizations will be able to continue operations or refocus their efforts based on lessons learned, remains to be seen. The UN Security Council established the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, in December 2001 to provide basic security for the people of Afghanistan and assist the Karzai administration. Since 2002, the total number of ISAF and U.S. forces have climbed from 15,000 to 150,000. The majority of them belong to various branches of the United States Armed Forces, who are not only fighting the Taliban insurgency but also training the Afghan Armed Forces and Afghan National Police. They are scheduled to withdraw slowly until the end of 2014, but Vice President Joe Biden has proposed to retain an unknown number of U.S. military personnel after the 2014 deadline if the security situation required and the Afghan government and people desired. Germany has announced that they will continue training Afghan police recruits after the 2014 withdrawal date for military troops. NATO and Afghan troops led many offensives against the Taliban in this period. By 2009, a Taliban-led shadow government began to form, complete with their own version of mediation court. In 2010, U.S. President Barack Obama deployed an additional 30,000 soldiers over a period of 6 months and proposed that he would begin troop withdrawals by 2012. At the 2010 International Conference on Afghanistan in London, Afghan President Hamid Karzai said he intended to reach out to the Taliban leadership, including Mullah Omar, Sirajuddin Haqqani and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. Supported by senior U.S. officials, Karzai called on the group's leadership to take part in a Loya Jirga meeting to initiate peace talks. According to the Wall Street Journal, these steps were initially reciprocated with an intensification of bombings, assassinations and ambushes. Many Afghan groups, including the former intelligence chief Amrullah Saleh and opposition leader Dr. Abdullah Abdullah, believe that Karzai's plan aims to appease the insurgent senior leadership at the cost of the democratic constitution, the democratic process and progress in the field of human rights, especially women's rights. Dr. Abdullah stated, "I should say that Taliban are not fighting in order to be accommodated. They are fighting in order to bring the state down. So it's a futile exercise, and it's just misleading. There are groups that will fight to the death. Whether we like to talk to them or we don't like to talk to them, they will continue to fight. So, for them, I don't think that we have a way forward with talks or negotiations or contacts or anything as such. Then we have to be prepared to tackle and deal with them militarily. In terms of the Taliban on the ground, there are lots of possibilities and opportunities that with the help of the people in different parts of the country, we can attract them to the peace process, provided we create a favorable environment on this side of the line. At the moment, the people are leaving support for the government because of corruption. So that expectation is also not realistic at this stage." According to a report by the United Nations, the Taliban were responsible for 76% of civilian casualties in 2009. Afghanistan is currently struggling to rebuild itself while dealing with the results of 30 years of war, corruption among high-level politicians and the ongoing Taliban insurgency, which according to different scientific institutes such as the London School of Economics, senior international officials, such as former United States Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Admiral Mike Mullen, believe the Taliban is backed by Pakistan's intelligence service. At the end of July 2010, the Netherlands became the first NATO ally to end its combat mission in Afghanistan after 4 years military deployment, including the most intense period of hostilities. They withdrew 1,900 troops. The Atlantic Council described the decision as politically significant because it comes at a time of rising casualties and growing doubts about the war. Canada withdrew troops in 2011, but about 900 were left to train Afghani soldiers. In February 2012, a small number of American service members burned several copies of the Quran. Some Afghans responded with massive demonstrations and riots in Kabul and other areas. Assailants killed several American military personnel, including 2 officers in the Interior Ministry building following this event. On March 11, 2012, an American soldier, Robert Bales, killed 16 civilians in the Kandahar massacre. According to ISAF, there were about 120,000 NATO-led troops in Afghanistan per December 2012, of which 66,000 were U.S. troops and 9,000 British. The rest were from 48 different countries. A process of handing over power to local forces has started, and according to plans a majority of international troops will leave in 2014. On November 24, 2013, President Karzai made a Loya Jirga and put a ban on NATO house raids. This ban was put in place, and NATO soldiers were instructed to obey and follow this ban. In December 2013, a house raid in Zabul province was exceptionally carried out by 2 NATO soldiers. Karzai condemned this in a highly publicized speech. On January 3, 2014, a bomb was heard by NATO soldiers in a base in Kabul. There were no reported casualties or injuries. The day after, a bomb hit a U.S. military base in Kabul and killed 1 U.S. citizen. The bomb was planted by the Taliban, and the American service member was the first combat casualty in Afghanistan in that year. The Taliban immediately claimed responsibility for the attack.